Good evening, members. Good evening, members of the public that may have tuned in. Good evening, officers. Welcome to the Planning Applications Committee, Thursday, the 30th of April. Firstly, I'll do the normal process of fire. I don't think we'll do fire instructions. No, we're not going to do those tonight. We just run. And are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. I haven't received any apologies for absence.
Members, are you agreeable if I sign the minutes of the last meeting? Thank you. I'll sign those.
Whilst the Chairman's signing the minutes, I'm just going to say that the councillors who are in attendance today but aren't members of the committee are councillors Alan McLafferty, Emma Jane McGrath and Councillor Pat Tedder. And officers in attendance today, going left to right, on the front row, Jonathan Partington, Eddie Scott, and then on the back row, Jenny Rickard, Sarita Bishop, Patricia Cesario, and Jessica Harris-Hooton.
Thank you very much. Cliff? Can you unmute, Cliff? Yes, can now, Cliff, yeah. Unmute again, you've muted again.
I've seen an email from Councillor David Mansfield apologising for not being able to attend. So I presume it's other people might have missed it, but there was an apology.
Yeah, he's not a member of the committee.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yes. Right. Are there any declarations we will deal with on the first item, which takes us on to application number 1 on page 13, the sewage disposal works, 30 Doman Road, Camberley. On declarations, I will say that I've received correspondence by email on this item, and I've also received a presentation document. Are there any other, I assume everybody's had the same thing, are there any other declarations to make on this item? Right, I'll go across the top as I'm looking at people. Councillor Rise.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to add that I've also received a phone call from the applicant, from representatives of the applicant. Obviously, I still retain an open mind. Thank you,
Councillor Tapper.
Yes, I've been lucky enough to receive 3 phone calls from them, from their representatives. I just thought that that ought to be known. I'm sure most of us have received several contacts from the representatives of the applicant in this particular case.
Thank you. No. Councillor Morley.
Thank you. I went to a meeting with the applicant prior to the submission of the application to view their site, not related necessarily to the application. When the application was mentioned, I said that I was at that point on planning committee and therefore could not make any comments about the application.
Thank you. Noted. Anybody else? Yes, Councillor Whitcroft.
Yes, I have also received a telephone call from the applicant and remain with an open mind.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Yes, I had 2 phone calls from the applicant and advised them that I was on the committee and couldn't discuss it.
Thank you. Councillor Dugan.
Yeah, just to say that I guess in my current role, I am head of economic development, and I've spoken to the team about the efforts that they have put in around this application, and indeed was involved with it when I was previously the head of economic development.
Right, thank you very much. I think that's it, unless I've missed anybody. Apologies. And Mrs. Bishop, would you like to take us forward, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. The scheme before you this evening slides. Technology works. There.
I'll click through for you then.
Thank you. We start with the first slide. The application site is in the Yorktown area of Camberley. As you can see on the right hand side, we have an aerial photograph of the site. It is land that is adjacent to the sewage treatment works, which is the, I can't point with this, that is to the east of Blackwater Valley Road and to the north of Riverside Way. The scheme before you is for a two-phase development. The first phase comprises the majority of the development for a replacement headquarters and distribution facility for Stihl, who are a local employer. The total floor space will be provided will be 16,456 square metres, and this will include warehouse, offices, training, workshop facilities, car parking, servicing, the remodelling of the land and associated landscaping. As you can see from the plan, there is a new proposed access onto the Blackwater Valley Road, which is a left-in, left-out arrangement with parking to the north and the building to the south. You will see on the submitted plan that there is an area to the southern boundary that is the part of the flood compensation area, which we will come back to later. The second phase, as you can see here, is an extension to the building to the south, and this will be solely for warehouse purposes. So all of the accommodation bar an extension to the warehouse will be provided as part of phase one. These are the phase one elevations, and these are the phase two elevations. Now, I want to bring this plan up to show members. This is important because of the objection from the Environment Agency. As you will see, this is the building here. This area here is designated as a flood compensation area. So I will come back to that later. This is looking up the Blackwater Valley Road towards Sainsbury's. The new access arrangements will be in this location here. And this is looking from Riverside, so Riverside Way is just here. And this is looking up towards Yorktown. And this is our site from here, extending up into the distance here. And this is looking at the site from within the Thames Water sewage treatment works. So this is at the northern end of the site, and then this looks towards Riverside Way. Now, the issues are as set out in the report. As you will see, the development is acceptable in principle. It is adjacent to one of our core employment areas. In terms of the overall floor space being provided, the sequential test has been passed in terms of there is nowhere else in our functional and economic development area that this could take place in. We have looked at the impact on the character of the area, on landscaping and trees, highway matters, and ecology, and in all respects, the development is considered to be acceptable. The issue that has resulted in the recommendation this evening is the objection from the Environment Agency. Part of the site is within flood zone 3B. What this means is that it is not water compatible development as set out in the technical guidance to the National Planning Policy Framework. This means that the council cannot recommend a scheme for development in this area in the light of this kind of objection from the Environment Agency having regard to the technical advice. The offset for this is that the application is also accompanied by a flood risk assessment. Now, in this respect, the Environment Agency do not raise objection. They are satisfied that the flood risk management associated with the development is acceptable. They acknowledge it will be a betterment. However, because of the designation of 3B, the recommendation remains to refuse. There is an update to the report. We have received a 5-page legal opinion from the applicant, which basically sets out that members of the Planning Application Committee are entitled to come to a different view or conclusion to that recommended by officers. But as I'm sure members of the committee will know, that has always been the case. They have also provided details of a planning decision in Windsor and Maidenhead, where planning permission was granted contrary to an objection from the EA on flood risk grounds, particularly in relation to 3B. Therefore, the recommendation is to refuse. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bishop. We have a video from Mr. Burrows, who is one of the applicants. The applicants, as you know, are both Andrea Steele and Thames Water Utilities Limited. Are we ready for the video?
Staff, we need you to grant this planning application. Good evening, my name is Nick Burrows and I am the Finance Director at Steele. I have worked at Steele for nearly 20 years and lived in the Camberley area for nearly all that time. We have operated at Stanhope Road since 1991 and in that time grown from less than 50 staff to 130, a number of whom have been with us for all that time. By 2015, the growth of our business meant that we needed a bigger building, as we had started using an external warehouse in Swindon. Steele are a family company, and we are not going to relocate to a cheaper part of the country. So to protect their jobs, we promised our staff that we would stay within 5 to 10 miles of our current building. Despite everything that is happening around the world today, we still have agreement from our parent company to invest nearly £40 million in this building, allowing us to accommodate all our current activity and planned future growth. When we started looking, we struggled to find any suitable sites, until after a couple of years we were approached by the late Kevin Cantlon, who described this site to us and introduced us to Thames Water to discuss a potential development. We were aware from early on in the process that there is an issue with the site regarding the technical flood designation. Because of this, the imperative was to develop a scheme that worked with the perceived flooding risk. In consultation with the Environment Agency and using level for level modelling, the scheme has the floor of the building at the 1 in 100 year flooding level plus additional freeboard, and then adding a further 35% for climate change. We are able to use a portion of the site to balance the levels across the whole site. This actually means that the overall capacity of the site to contain floodwater has been increased by approximately 1,000 cubic metres. To reiterate that point, after we have built this building, there will be more storage available for floodwater than currently. We're not developers building this site for someone else or planning to sell it on at completion. This will be the home of our business for the long term, and as we are planning to occupy this site for at least the next 25 years, we have no desire to create a building which is going to flood when it rains or negatively affect our neighbours. The area of land used for flood balancing will be landscaped and gives us the opportunity to introduce an area for new habitat for wildlife. The wildlife impact is a concern in any application, but within the constraints of our site, we will absolutely commit to work with Surrey Wildlife Trust to create the very best wildlife habitat that we can. One thing that can apply in a situation like this is a sequential test. This is an exercise to look at the surrounding area and establish if there are any potential alternative sites. We have looked at the whole of Surrey Heath and 3 neighbouring boroughs, and there are no other potential sites for our development. We do understand that we are asking you to overturn the recommendation of the planning officer, but the facts here support you in doing so. Both the Environment Agency and the planning officer acknowledge that their objection is an in-principle objection based on policy due to the designation of the site as Flood Zone 3B. They have no option but to object due to that designation. What they have both also acknowledged is that this development has more floodwater storage capacity after completion and has no negative impact on the surrounding area. We have provided advice from a barrister about the legality of you granting this application despite the officer recommendation. He has stated quite clearly that the decision rests with you and you are entirely within your rights to grant permission on the basis that the development offers flood risk improvements alongside significant economic and other benefits. This is a new way of running a planning committee and we cannot attend in person to answer questions, but if at the end of this committee you have any outstanding queries, may we request that consideration is given to deferral so that we have the opportunity to clarify. We really want to stay here in Camberley and Surrey Heath, and to do that and to keep our promise to our staff, we need you to grant this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Councillor McClafferty has indicated that he would wish to address the committee. Councillor McClafferty is, of course, able to do so as a councillor. In this instance, he is a ward councillor. Councillor McClafferty, please.
Thank you, Chair. That's the first time I've seen that video.
Sorry, Councillor, before you go, I should, for those people watching, say that whilst you are able to address the committee and are a councillor, you do not have a vote in the outcome of the deliberations. Thank you for that.
Thank you. I understand. Thank you. As I say, that's the first time I've seen that video, and there's a lot of things that the applicant has said that I had wanted to reiterate to you, and I'm going to cut down on what I was going to say, because I think although some things are worth reiterating, I don't think it's worth just repeating and taking your time. You've got a long meeting ahead of you. As the chairman said, I'm speaking to you as ward councillor in support of this application. The benefits of the new headquarters scheme to this business are pretty obvious, but they are threefold for me. One is that they are creating jobs. They currently employ about 130, and they are looking to double that number in the new building. That's a lot of employment for us. And although the client just said, or the applicant just said that they were looking to stay, they do, of course, have a business imperative, and it would be a very bad thing for Surrey Heath if they were to leave. I know they have a building in Swindon, and if they did, I don't know how many of that 130 staff would then transfer to Swindon or anywhere else well outside the borough. So I think it's not only about creating new jobs. For me, it's also about protecting the jobs that are there. They're bringing a derelict site back into use. You heard that they've spent 2 years trying to find a site for this very large building. So it isn't a case of land is easy to find. And there's just nowhere else for them to go. And thirdly, leaving a building, the building that they're currently in, they are categorically going to sell that building. And that gives obviously a Surrey Heath business a chance to grow into that building. And then another business can move in behind them, or we may attract a new employer outside the borough back into it. So everything says, from an economic point of view, this is good. So you wonder why then is it a case of somebody's objected? Everything says this is a good application, except the Environment Agency's in principle objection. I'll be honest with you, I do not understand their objection, because they seem to be straddling the divide. On one hand, they are saying that they accept that they have done a betterment, which to me is mitigating the flooding, by actually creating greater capacity than there is there now, but they still object. And what that does is they still have done everything they possibly can, everything they've been asked to do and more to mitigate that flood issues. And they're willing to invest heavily in this site just to stay in Surrey Heath, just because they promised their staff. And there's a business imperative there. They don't want to be changing all of those staff out for new staff. So there's a business imperative, but they are a family business that said they want to stay in the area. The officers' hands are tied because of that objection from the Environment Agency. So they must recommend refusal, but luckily that's why members are given the ultimate authority to decide what's actually right, not just what's being said by some government position. So I strongly urge you to support this application. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McClafferty. Mr. Scott, did you want to make a comment on something?
I just wanted to clarify for members and anyone at home that starting from the officer's presentation, if a member drops out of the meeting and needs to be readmitted, as in line with Part 4, Section D of the Constitution, they won't be able to participate in the debate or vote on the application being determined at the time.
Thank you. Councillor McClafferty, I don't normally take questions, but as we have an open debate, I will make this exception.
I think this might come under point of order, if I may. Eddie, I can understand completely the point you just made. Can I ask that while we are working in a new way, that perhaps if we see someone drops out, and there's usually a way of seeing they've dropped out, could you just give them, say, 60 seconds or so to, pause the meeting, give them 60 seconds to log back in so they haven't missed anything? Would that not be a reasonable thing? Because somebody could listen to 85% of the meeting and then not be allowed to vote simply because they were out for 60 seconds.
I think the chairman is going out on a wing on this one, surrounded by officers and legal experts. And
Are you still talking? Because I can't hear you.
If you look, they've actually muted the Zoom meeting. So although it looks to me as though, I know, not quite frozen. So I think that's probably why.
It happened last time and never came back.
right, are you going? Can you right back up? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, you had muted us so we could have a debate. And yeah, it's a not unreasonable request given the problems I think Mr. Betton had when he was chairing. Nothing to do against Mr. Betton, but we will take a view. It is a point noted, and it is something that we will have to take into account in due course and take a view. So members, now we've had the presentation, I will open it up to member questions or to the officers or comments. Members, Councillor Whitcroft.
Could the officer please confirm on the paperwork it says that there's no comment from Surrey Wildlife. Could you confirm that you still haven't had that, please?
We have had comments from Surrey Wildlife Trust. They are recommending biodiversity offsetting, which may be secured in the event the planning permission is granted, that we would secure that by way of a Section 106 legal agreement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to? Right, Councillor Allaway.
Good evening, Chairman and officers. First of all, may I say thank you to keeping this planning committee on target and the efforts you've gone to accommodate this Zoom facility. For the planning application, unfortunately, there's no one from the applicant in the meeting to be able to ask questions of, because I did have a couple of questions which I wanted to pose to them. I don't know how you wish to handle this, but my first question would be, given all of the issues around flooding and mitigation, I wanted to ask if the applicant actually commits to complying with all the conditions that will be in this potential accepted planning application. And And I was going to ask about the plans for potential expansion. And I just listened to Councillor McClafferty, being the ward councillor, alluding to a potential of 260 employees on the site. Currently, the plans are accommodating 130 employees, and that will result in 122 parking spaces with the completion of phase 2. I just wondered where the other 130 might be parking. And thirdly, to the officers really, just to confirm if all these flood mitigation measures provide enough assurance that there is no increased risk to others.
I think Mrs. Bishop can have most of the answers to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of still and compliance with the planning conditions, that is we would expect that to happen in any occasion. If conditions are imposed, we would expect all applicants to comply with them. What I would say in this case is that still have made it very clear with the package that they have put forward that they are very keen to work with the council. They are looking to bring forward a scheme that is a credit to them as well as anybody else. So they are, I have no doubt that they would comply with their conditions. In the unlikely event they don't, we also have our own statutory powers to make sure that they do. With regards to the flood risk assessment, the Environment Agency, Surrey County Council as the lead local flood authority, and the in-house drainage engineer are all satisfied that the flood storage capacity is a betterment to the existing situation, and on that basis they do not raise objection to the scheme on flood risk grounds.
So there wouldn't be any potential impacts to any other parties in the event of flooding?
It is a betterment to the existing situation.
Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. The reason that the officer has given for refusing this application clearly relates to the Environment Agency's evaluation of the land on which this is going to be built as being flood risk 3B. I have actually checked the report published on the Surrey Heath Borough Council website from Capita, who did the evaluation and referred to the Environment Agency report on the flood level risk of this area, and it does confirm that virtually the entire area on which the building is going to be constructed, if permission is given to go ahead, is entirely within the highest risk flood designation. However, I'm perfectly well aware, as probably most people are, that having this situation made clear that architecturally it is unable to be dealt with by making the building itself flood-proof by various measures, including things like building it on stilts so that it rises above the flood level. So that itself is, although it's the objection, the principal objection, is not my biggest concern. My largest concern about this is that the result of constructing this building will be the wholesale destruction of what is very clearly an extensive, vibrant woodland. Now, I've looked at the item 7.5.3 in our agenda today, the report from the cultural officer on this, and I see once again that, in my opinion, an expedient decision has been arrived at by the tree officer. Let's call him the tree officer, it's less cumbersome than his official title. An expedient conclusion has been given here that all of this woodland can be considered to be very low level, very low quality. I think the photographs that we have been shown within the presentation by the applicants says that this anything but the truth. it's quite clear that the trees and all the woodland there are in very good condition. They're growing vibrantly and contributing largely to the local resolution of the problems with pollution. So I am once again distraught that our tree officer appears to have come to a decision that is, as I say, expedient in my opinion. I do find this most distressing, particularly when in other situations where trees have been notified to them as being a potential risk to life and limb of residents, that they have declared that every tree is sacrosanct. So my question basically is, with this vast number of trees and undergrowth that is going to be destroyed by this development, how much is going to be returned to compensate them for that, other than a very thin strip of trees 10 meters deep right along the edge of the Blackwater Valley? Can anybody give an answer as to the exact proportion that the replacement trees represent compared with what is there now?
I was hoping you were going to come to a question after all of that. Well, the recommendation from the officer at the moment is for refusal. Mr. Bishop, do we have any comment on that, or is that would be conditioned in the event of the members wish to overturn the officer recommendation?
I can't give a precise proportion, but what I would say is that the scheme is accompanied by a very detailed landscaping condition. With regard to the comments from Wildlife Trust, there will also be, if members are minded to approve, a biodiversity offsetting scheme that would be associated with this development to address biodiversity enhancements on the site and beyond.
Thank you. Councillor Dugan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got quite a lot I would like to say, actually, both as ward councillor and also as the economic development, or the head of economic development at the moment. So when this first came up, I have to say I was somewhat surprised when we found out Still were looking to relocate, that we didn't have anywhere for them to go in the borough. I mean, they just want to build one building, and you'd have thought we had enough land. I was somewhat astonished to find that we don't. We simply don't have enough economic development land to enable one new building, albeit a big one, to be built. And as you heard the applicant say, and will have read in the paper, the sequential test says that not only does Surrey Heath not have it, neither does Rushmoor, Bracknell Forest, nor Hart. There just isn't that kind of land around. So I think the economic development team and Kevin Canton was name-checked earlier, did a fantastic job in bringing this opportunity to us and to Still, really, because it was his conversations with Thames Water which enabled this to happen. Still themselves, I mean, the speaker, I don't think, frankly, blew his trumpet well enough. They are an absolutely fantastic employer. I found out yesterday, in fact, that I understand that they've had to furlough some staff because clearly their entire distribution network's closed. But that would leave their staff out of pocket by 20%. That's what the furlough scheme's all about. Still, as a family-run company, the family have committed to pay the members of staff furloughed the extra 20%, so their staff are not out of pocket. They've been phenomenally patient with this whole process. It's taken an extremely long period of time to get to this point. And I think they've put in quite a phenomenal application. It is extraordinarily positive. I can't think of very many applications that come in that are this positive. Principal and development's accepted. There's no adverse harm to the surrounding area. We've actually got the active support of the Highways Authority. Actually did some work and said yes, rather than said nothing. The local flood authority says yes. The council's scientific officers, yes. The council's drainage officers, yes. The council's tree officer, I like that because I find that word difficult to pronounce as well, Graham. And National England have raised no objection. And even the Environment Agency themselves have looked at the flood risk assessment and have no objections with it. the numbers of staff, by the way, I'm not quite sure where Councillor McClafferty got his from, but I will try and hold up this, which you may have seen as part of the pack that came from Still. So they are suggesting that the proposed on-site jobs will be 140. Again, what they didn't mention is that this will be a significant bill, and we will have we'll have 67 other jobs created during the construction phase. The applicant himself and I think Sarita mentioned the fact that the application passes a sequential test. Now, it doesn't need to pass the sequential test right now because it's 3B and there is no sequential test. But it does, for all of the reasons I mentioned earlier, in terms of Hart, Rushmore and other places not having it. The 1,000 cubic meters of water extra that the design enables to be stored is the equivalent of 2 of the 25-meter swimming pools that we are building in our new leisure centre, extra to what the area supports today. I think we've already mentioned the fact that the building will be flood resilient. It's going to be built such that a 1 in 100 year flooding event will not flood the ground floor. And in fact, it's a 1 in 100 year plus. I read 20% in the report. The applicant said 35%, but who's quibbling? Additional because of the climate change. And as I said before, the EA is satisfied with the flood risk compensation, and they don't raise an objection. So, bar for an objection in principle, as I see it, this is a model application from a major global employer wanting to save jobs and grow jobs in Surrey Heath, making a massive inward investment in our borough. And as we've said before, the officers can't approve. It says quite clearly that they can't, but we can. And we've got pages and pages of good reasons and legal advice as to why we can approve this and give the Secretary of State for the Environment a question to answer. And as I see it, it's a free hit. I can't see why we wouldn't pass this to the Environment Agency and the Secretary of State to make the decision with a wholehearted supporting approval. We should back local businesses. We should back our local jobs in a time when both have never needed our backing so much. And I think if we approve it and give it to the Secretary of State to look at the benefits, I believe the report lays out. I will undoubtedly be voting against the officer recommendation and for approval of this excellent opportunity for the borough.
Thank you, Councillor Dugan. In your litany of supporters, you didn't actually mention, at least I didn't hear it, that Surrey County Council, as the lead local flood authority, have no objection. I thought I'd throw that one in as well.
No, I definitely mentioned them. Definitely mentioned them. The local lead flood authority. I mentioned it after them as the highways authority. I mentioned them twice.
I beg your pardon. Councillor Wheeler.
Hi. It's really just relating back to a query that was raised by Councillor Tapper. If he looks at the plans on page 45, it shows clearly that the new development will go completely, other than that strip along the front, over the current trees that are there. But on that matter, I do think we do have to be guided by the arboricultural officer. I have no problem saying it, on the basis that they do look quite closely at species of trees, and an awful lot of this will have just sprung up as opposed to being a good tree substance. I think it's really disappointing that something which improves the flood situation still has to be recommended by our officers for refusal. And well done for the officers for doing such an excellent report that essentially allows us to come to a different conclusion to the conclusion that they have reached. and I will be supporting overturning the officer's recommendation. I think it's brilliant. I think it's great that they're staying in the borough. I think the fact they can get immediately out onto the M3 and onto a major road network without thundering through our villages is fabulous.
Thank you. Right, okay, I mean, I think we've talked about this. We have an officer recommendation. The officers have no choice, as you can see from the report, but to follow the guidance laid out by the MPPF and other dictates. So there is an officer recommendation. Can I have a proposer and a seconder for the officer recommendation to refuse the application? Councillor Wheeler, are you proposing refuse? I'll ignore that one then. I see nobody showing any indication that they wish to support the officer recommendation. Therefore, we will need to take another vote. But before we do so, we will need to agree some terms, recommendations, etc. I've written down, if I can read my writing, sorry, Councillor Alloway.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I do note that the applicant isn't here to be able to give any further assurances, but the parking situation does concern me. With any amount of extra cars, maybe potentially 100, where they're going to go. They're going to litter up the estate around, it's going to cause chaos. So perhaps could it be a condition that the excess vehicles related to expansion are all contained on site? I see they've got a large, what looks like a parking area, and if possible that could become a two-storey affair to accommodate all the extra vehicles related to expansion.
Thank you. I'll just add that to the notes. We need to have planning sound reasons. I was starting in no particular order that we would need to see a full landscaping strategy. The trees that were mentioned by Councillor Tapper, we need to see a detailed tree, and I believe, so that one has been put forward already. Biodiversity enhancement, just about read that. A detailed parking strategy. Are there any other planning reasons? I mean, the main reason is that, as far as I can see, that they are an existing employer. They they are bringing economic benefits to the area, which is acceptable in planning terms, I believe. And they're supported by the Surrey Heath economic team. The building has passed the sequential test, and I'm not expecting the officer to write all this down, but this is recorded, along with the additional conditions that I'm going to suggest. Members, do you have anything else that you wish to add to that list? Ultimately, the final wording would be agreed with the chairman, vice chairman, and ward councillors. But we do need to record and have proper planning reasons for the next vote, which we will take. Members, anything else you wish to add?
I think we should add the betterment to the flooding, Chair, which you haven't mentioned, but it's quite clear. I mean, frankly, I'd take the entire officer report, take out the one statement that says that there is an objection in principle and it's a fatal flaw, and submit it, because it's very well written, supporting an approval. It outlines all of the excellent things that and the patience that the applicant has put in to make this a successful development. And I think we would need to condition out all of the elements where the report states that we need to condition those things in, like the biodiversity agreement, Section 106 agreement, and a number of others. But again, they're all in the report. You just need to go through the report and pull them out. And the only thing which you've already mentioned is I would place much greater emphasis on the economic upside of this application than is in the report, because that is lacking, I would say. But the applicant has very handily done that for you in an infogram that you could even submit.
The whole report would go forward, as I understand it, to the Secretary of State with our recommendation, and I'm seeking some key headings rather than write the whole report to go with the recommendation, which will be put across your desk as Ward Councillor. I'm seeking some key headings. I've added betterment to the flooding in there. Councillor Wheeler.
Oh, sorry, it was just before we went down red heading in terms of parking. They're giving 122 car parking spaces, 48 bicycle spaces. So actually, given that most people are not at work all at the same time, and I believe that they've got quite a good system with giving people links into public transport as well, it would appear to be more than sufficient. So just kind of like to scrub that away, certainly from my point of view as a concern, it seems fine.
We might actually see some more cyclists on the BVR on that very nice cycle path, but I couldn't possibly comment on that score. Right, we have some comments. I think we've...
just to clarify, we will need to send it to the Secretary of State, and in respect of sending it to the Secretary of State, if there's any further material considerations above those that are in the report, and Councillor Dugan, you've already made the point in terms of those issues within the officer's report, and we've also got the list that Councillor Hawkins you read out as well. In respect to planning conditions, you've raised certain ones. You've raised landscape strategy, you've raised trees, biodiversity enhancement, detailed parking strategy. What I'd like to say to members is we've got a number of consultee responses, for example, from Highways England, for example, from County Highways Authority. Can I get some understanding from members as to whether or not they would agree with us putting forward the conditions which have been raised by those statutory consultees? Because that would be the standard approach. In addition, conditions such as standard timescale, which is typically 3 years, condition in respect to sample materials, and the application is in accordance with the drawing numbers, which would be a standard condition that we would impose. What I would suggest to members is that we would agree to precise wording with the Chairman and Vice Chair.
I take it that there's nobody indicating they do not agree with Mr. Partington on that. Thank you, Councillor Tapper. So,
Chair, can I just add my pet favourite is can we add construction hours as well? Because it is relatively close to a housing estate on its rear boundary, and we don't want metal clanging at 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning.
Construction hours typically is covered by separate legislation, which is non-planning legislation. However, typically there would be construction highways and environmental management plan, and they would include the hours of operation within that, so it would be covered in that respect. But it's separate environmental protection legislation.
Right, can I have a proposer for the recommendation to grant? Councillor Dugan, I will second that.
Just want to clarify in terms of the resolution, it's the referral to the Secretary of State. And the other thing that still needs to be agreed is the wording and the Section 106 legal agreement in terms of the biodiversity enhancement, which has already been spoken about. So we need to ensure that that's included within that as well.
Right. I think we've got all that. Councillor Dugan proposed, I've seconded, and Mr. Scott will run through the list of councillors, and if you could confirm agreement to the recommendation of the proposal or otherwise. Thank you.
Councillor Graham Alloway.
Agreed.
Councillor Peter Barnett.
I agree.
Councillor Cliff Betton.
Agreed.
Councillor Sarah Jane Croke.
Agreed.
Councillor Colin Dugan.
Agreed.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
Agreed.
Councillor Edward Hawkins.
Agreed.
Councillor David Lewis.
Agreed.
Councillor Charlotte Morley.
Agreed.
Councillor Darren Rataram.
Agreed.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
Agreed.
Councillor Graham Tapper.
Abstain.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
Agreed.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
Agreed.
Councillor Valerie White.
Agreed.
Thank you, members. That was carried. 14 votes in agreement with 1 abstention and no votes against. Thank you very much for that. Moving on to the second item on page 47 of the agenda, phase 6, Albany Park, Camberley. Are there any declarations on this item? No. Mrs. Bishop, please.
Thank you, Chairman.
No, it's been Alan.
Alan. It is Alan. I apologise.
We'll be coming back.
Right, the scheme that we are looking at is at Albany Park. It's on the Albany Park employment area. You see, you've got the scheme before us is for the demolition of the existing building, which is outlived its useful life, and its replacement with a 2-storey building that will be subdivided into 3 separate units. And they will be for use within B1C, B2 and B8, which is light industrial, general industrial and warehousing. This is the building that is proposed. As you'll see, it is compatible with existing development in Albany Park. And as you'll see shortly from the photos, also with the development that's in Lion Way to the south. This is the site as it is at the moment, although when I went there last week, they have actually put some concrete bollards up to stop access into it. It is very much of its time of construction. And as you see, these are the new buildings that have been built in Lion Way. As you will see from the committee report, it is acceptable in principle. It's within an established core employment area. It is acceptable in terms of its impact on the character of the area and also on adjoining occupiers. The closest residence to this scheme would be a Magna Vita within Lion Way, but environmental health are satisfied that with the intervening buildings, no further measures are required in respect of the proposed development. It makes appropriate provision for parking and access, and is acceptable in terms of drainage and water environment. There is an update to the report. In April this year, a demolition prior approval was granted so that they can demolish the building independently of the Planning Commission, and they have also agreed an extension of time for the determination of this application until the 5th of May. The recommendation is to grant chairman subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, comments? No. Right, members, we have a recommendation to grant. Is there a proposer, seconder? Councillor Rise, you proposing? Yeah. Councillor Croke, were you seconding? Oh, sorry, Councillor Morley, I do apologise. I'm sorry, I didn't see you over there. I beg your pardon, Councillor Morley. All those, again, Mr. Scott, would you like to, or are we taking, do we want to take on that? Or? Well,
Just for accountability.
yeah. Right, Mr. Scott will read out our names. Thank you for that.
Councillor Graham Alloway.
In favour.
Councillor Peter Barnett.
In favour.
Councillor Cliff Betton.
Agreed.
Councillor Sarah Jane Croke.
In favour.
Councillor Colin Dugan.
Agreed.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
Agreed.
Councillor Edward Hawkins.
Agreed.
Councillor David Lewis.
Agreed.
Councillor Charlotte Morley.
Agreed.
Councillor Darryl Ratteram.
Agreed.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
Agreed.
Councillor Graham Tapper.
In favour.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
For.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
Agreed.
And Councillor Valerie White.
Agreed.
Thank you, members. I can work that one out. It was unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Now on to our next item in a second. Yeah. Right, item number 3 on page 69. Matthews Corner Garage, Windlesham, on declarations. I've had a letter from the architect on behalf of the applicant. Members, do you have any other declarations? Councillor McGrath, you are not a member of the committee, but I will take Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. Just to say that I have visited the site and met with the applicant prior to this application being submitted. I've also had correspondence with and conversations with members of the Windlesham Society in relation to this, and have also been written to by the neighbours in relation to this application.
Thank you. I hate to think the number of times I've driven past the site, but that's it. Anybody else got any declarations to make? No. And it's Mrs. Torresio, please. Behind me.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Why did I go back?
You're way there.
That's all right. Thank you. The spelling application at Matthews Corner Garage is for the erection of a terrace of 3 dwellings and 1 detached building to accommodate 4 flats. The application site, which you can see here outlined in red, lies within the green belt and also within the Church Road Conservation Area. Currently, the site is occupied by a commercial car sales business. Sorry. The application follows a previously refused application, which members may recall seeing here back in September last year. This was refused on the grounds of green belt, insufficient parking, and character of the area. Here on the right-hand side, you can see the proposed scheme, and the applicant has sought to address the reasons for refusal by reducing the residential units from 8 to 7. However, the reduction in terms of build form associated with this is minimal, as you can see on page 73 of the committee papers. It therefore remains that a revised proposal would constitute inappropriate development in Greenbelt that in addition would cause harm to openness. The parking layout has also been revised, as you can see here, and this now would provide sufficient parking spaces to serve the development. So this is no longer a reason for refusal. Sorry. Here you can see the street scenes as previously on previous scheme and on the proposed scheme. Given the scale and size of the buildings remained fairly similar to the previous scheme, the proposal failed to address the objections previously raised regarding the character of the area. The proposal would be considered acceptable regarding its impact on residential amenity. However, for the reasons stated throughout this presentation and in the officer's report, the proposal is recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 4 public speakers in essence. The first one is a video. We did a video? Yeah, the first one is video, which we will lead into now. The video, when we get there, is from Mr. Thomas Rumble and Rosie Jackson, the agent, and it is in favour of supporting the application. I've got nothing else I can say.
Good evening, Chair and members. I hope this presentation finds you all safe and well. I'm Tom Rumble, a local planning consultant who has worked in the Windlesham area for the past decade. During my presentation, I will refer to details I sent in an email to you earlier this week. The site is occupied by a car sales garage and surrounding hard standing which is used for the display of cars and valeting. The existing buildings are unattractive and the large volumes of parked cars are unsightly. The sent photos demonstrate the reality of the site's appearance for many years. This site is located in the Windlesham Conservation Area, an area of acknowledged heritage quality. The Council's Conservation Officer supports the application and refers to it as one that can enhance the conservation area. As illustrated in the forwarded architectural sketches, the scheme includes a white painted finish and heights consistent with its neighbours, as well as architectural features such as chimney stacks, natural slate roofs and sash windows. Subsequent to a previous application, the owner has engaged me to review the proposal and improve it. The amendments mean that the dwelling mix now provides solely for 2 and 3 bedroom dwellings, directly responding to the needs identified in the neighbourhood plan. It complies with the neighbourhood plan's allocated car parking standards and does not include tandem parking, and provides more usable green amenity space. Case law confirms that it is for the decision maker to decide whether very special circumstances exist to enable an application to be approved. VSCs are to be cumulatively assessed and unrestricted as to what they may include. I strongly believe that the listed VSCs attract great weight and enable the application to be approved. 1, a sensitive design that enhances the conservation area. 2, the efficient use of brownfield land. 3, the removal of the display of cars and associated noise. 4, a substantial reduction in hard standing and the reintroduction of green landscaping. And 5, a contribution directly towards the need for 2 and 3 bedroom properties. If a site ever has development logic, it is this one. I therefore advocate that you support the proposal on sound VSC grounds tonight. I now hand over to Miss Rosie Jackson.
Good evening. In these strange times, I hope everybody is safe and well. I'm a resident of Church Road and support this application. The site is an eyesore. The concrete covered site is permanently covered in up to 100 cars and is effectively an open air storage facility with a huge amount of vehicle movement. Customers, mechanics, parts deliveries and car transporters blocking Church Road weekly, as well as the nuisance of a car valeting area. The current owners are of retirement age and wish to see the site developed before considering alternatives. I fear if the sensible proposal is not passed, it may be left permanently in the hands of the motor trade, or worse, considering its use class, drive-through car wash, mechanics, small industrial units, etc. This is a window of opportunity, perhaps the last, to enhance the quality of the area through a high-quality residential scheme contributing to the local housing supply. Surely common sense should prevail. The significant benefits of this well-designed scheme amount to the very special circumstances required to outweigh any alleged harm to Greenbelt and meet the requirements of the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for that. And now Mr. Scott will read out, is it one statement? Two statements. Firstly, from Tina Richardson, Windlesham, and Jeremy Russell Lowe. I think in that order.
Yeah. So this is from Ms. Tina Richardson, who's a committee member of the Windlesham Society. So the Windlesham Society objects to the application. Thank you for the opportunity of speaking this evening to explain our reasons. Background on the Windlesham Society. Firstly, for those of you who don't live in Windlesham, some background on the Windlesham Society. The Windlesham Society is a long-established Windlesham Village charity that is funded by annual subscriptions from Windlesham households and businesses. Close to 30% of Windlesham's households are members of the society. The officers and the committee are annually elected at the AGM. The trustees are registered with the Charity Commission, and its accounts are audited and published on an annual basis. The Society's constitution is centred around improving the quality of life of village residents and businesses and protecting the village from detrimental change. As part of this remit, the Society supported the development of the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan, which was approved by Windlesham Village electors via a positive referendum result in 2019. Subsequently, Surrey Heath Borough Council made the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan part of the statutory development plan for SHBC in June 2019. The Society's reasons for objecting to this proposal. The Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan represents a robust framework through which sustainable growth can be delivered in Windlesham Village. As part of the SHBC local plan, it must now be considered when addressing new planning applications. We would like to emphasise that the Society considers that the Cavalier City area of Church Road would benefit from appropriate redevelopment that is in accordance with legislation governing greenbelt and conservation areas, which is designed to further enhance this otherwise attractive conservation area within Windlesham. That being said, we objected to a very similar proposal for the development of this site, which was subsequently refused by SHBC in July 2019. And once again, we must object to this new proposal as it is not consistent with the following policies referenced within the neighbourhood plan. Policies 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3 refer to the character and amenity of future housing in Windlesham and recommend that proposals should only be supported if they protect the built and natural character features of their proposed setting within the village. We consider that this proposal, which would increase the built form on this site by 333%, would represent an overbearing presence, which and would not maintain the open style and pattern of separation between buildings in Church Road, thereby detracting from the natural character of this conservation area. We would like to add support to the opinion expressed by the SHBC Planning Department, who have concluded that the amount of development proposed would be harmful to the greenbelt, both in spatial and visual terms, and that no very special circumstances exist which would outweigh the identified greenbelt harm which would result from this scale of development. Finally, the Windlesham Society would like to emphasise that we could support a more sympathetic development of the Church Road site. In adopting the neighbourhood plan, 98% of Windlesham residents regarded the conservation areas as being very important, and so any future proposal for development on this site would need to be fully respectful of both conservation area legislation and the neighbourhood plan in order to secure the Society's support. And that was from Tina Richardson, committee member of the Windlesham Society. The second submission is from Jeremy Russell Lowe. Dear Chairman and members of the Planning Committee, I speak in objection to this application. The case officer in recommendation for refusal of this application clearly and actually substantiates the legal framework and the clear reasons why the current proposal does not meet the constraints placed upon the site under planning legislation, and why there are no very special circumstances that would enable a development that would permit an increased volume of built form 333% greater than currently exists, and that would so negatively impact on the openness of the greenbelt. The existing garage was in existence before the area was designated a conservation area. It was included because the site does not make a contribution to the area by way of its existing limited single-storey built form. I quote, "The lack of two-storey buildings on this site is itself a characteristic of this part of the conservation area." That was Martin Higgins, Heritage Officer for the Director's Services for Communities, Surrey County Council, Heritage Officer 2009. The garage site has always been presented in single-storey built form, set back from Church Road to the centre of the site. It is not visible to Kennel Lane at all, which ensures that the openness of the greenbelt is maintained on that elevation. The proposed development is excessive in scale and removes that clearly stated and positive character. It is the removal of the garage use that could benefit the conservation area. Building on it is then a question of scale that is not harmful, and one that explicitly retains the benefits of the openness of the site, and at the same time respecting the surrounding plot sizes, spacing, and character of the conservation area as a whole. It is simply not beneficial to the area to overdevelop the site as proposed by adding a further 7 dwellings. The current proposal will cause more harm to the area than the existing garage does. A much smaller residential development would still remove the garage use and give opportunity to sympathetically enhance the conservation area. So there simply does not exist a single reason why greater development such as proposed in this application is necessary. It is not as if local residents are anti-building, which I believe is clear from the other objections to this application. It is simply that this application does not deliver on policy or the need to preserve and enhance the conservation area. The application density is just too overbearing and more harmful than the existing use. There remains well-documented recommendation for the future of this site set out by Mr. Higgins, Heritage Officer, and made in response to previous applications on the site. It recommends 3 cottages set back from Church Road, giving open space to the front. It is a sensible solution which reflects and maintains reference to surrounding plot sizes, scale of built form and density. It is a good balance between developing the site whilst retaining the special character of the conservation area and the openness of the greenbelt. It is my sincere hope that this current application is refused so that the opportunity remains open to deliver a scheme that truly enhances this valuable area of the village. Thank you for your consideration. Jeremy Russell Lowe.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Mr. Scott. Now we have 2 councillors that have indicated they wish to address the committee.
Bear with me, I just don't know who it is.
Yes, it's Emma. Oh, Emma's there. At who have we lost?
Charlotte, Helen Whitcroft. Helen Whitcroft.
Helen's gone, is she? Yeah.
Just see if she comes back, and I'll let her in if we're giving her a few moments to come.
Are we muted? Are we muted at the moment? Right, Pat, I see you were just waiting. Helen's dropped out. So stop waving at me. I see you. I've got you, Pat. I've got you. Helen's dropped off. We're just going to see if she comes back in. Give her a chance to come back in. No. Okay. She's not in the waiting room. She's not. No. Okay, I think we'll have to carry on then. Sorry, we've got two councillors that wish to speak. And again, for anybody watching, just to confirm, the councillors are able to address the committee as local councillors, but they do not have a vote in the final decision. Now, who of you is going first? Councillor Taylor, were you going first? Unmute then and come. Unmute.
Yep, okay. Good evening. First of all, let me just declare that I know the applicant because we rent land off him as a charity, and I'm a member of the Windlesham Society. I know one of the objectors because he's been a generous benefactor on another charity from which I stand, and I probably have one of the best accreditations is that I was born and bred in Windlesham, so I love it very dearly. But having said all that, I know Matthew's Corner Garage well. It's a rundown, dilapidated site that is in much, it's a brownfield site, which is in much need of doing something with. And I think the applicant has looked very hard at the iconic building that everybody calls Matthew's Corner Garage, which is the building that stands on the junction of Kennel Lane and Church Road. And it has done a design that ties in with that building. They're not red brick boxes with tiled roofs. These are tied in with that iconic building and makes it an item. It's something proud, something that will stand out. And we hear much about the characteristic of both Kennel Lane and Church Road. And if any of you have driven down there, you can see the mismatch of properties. Some have been extended, some haven't, some are bungalows, a couple of old cow sheds that have been converted over the years. There's some beautiful farms down there. And of course, there's Fromo's Nursery that was. And you can't say it's a conservation with a set piece. And I think the applicant has worked really hard on the design to get it right. And I think they really have. They've hit the roofs, they've lowered the roofs, so it ties in with the bungalow. And then there's the argument about a block of flats, terraced houses. You've got terraced houses close to the road in Kennel Lane. So you can pick it all out everywhere. But in the main, it has stuck to that iconic building and enhanced, in my opinion, enhanced it. There's not much else you can say, really, that this is a brownfield site, dilapidated, run down. It has been for years, and I cannot see why anybody would want to keep it. It's a conservation area. This design has been supported, highly supported by the conservation people recently. So I can't see the argument behind it. And I think one of the biggest things I would ask you to look at is, does it comply to the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan? Does it give what the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan asks for? And I think that is an important question. And I would ask you, if you're satisfied that it does give that, then I would ask you to please support this application and agree that this is a nice design and it would be a great improvement on that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Emma?
Evening all. Just to say that I do have a pecuniary interest because obviously I'm a member of the society as well, but also I do know David because he comes into my shop and has his hair cut. So just to say that as well. But I would say that I would be in support of this. It is a very rundown site. He has kept it in keeping really with the building of Matthew's Corner. I don't think it is overbearing for there. And looking through the Windlesham neighbourhood plan, I think he does actually come up to it as well. It is in being kept sympathetic, the space in between the buildings, and also when you're driving down Kennel Lane, he's still going to have the green hedge and that there as well. So, and obviously all the parking is off-road as well. So I would, if I was on the committee, hope that you would actually support this application, because yeah, he's looked at it and re-looked at it and has brought it back, which you asked him to do the last time as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Right, sorry, members. Councillor Rise.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to say first off that I will be voting against the officer recommendation on this. I think when the original application came before us the last time, one of the major points in terms of refusal was that it didn't meet the parking requirements. And as Mrs. Bishop, as the officer, sorry, Sarita, my mistake. As the officer said that this application does now meet the requirements on parking. I think we said that their parking was an issue, and the applicant has now addressed that. I also want to bring the committee's attention to the lack of no objections from the consultation responses, except obviously the Windlesham Society, which require, but obviously those require. Bear with me 1 second, sorry. But they do require planning conditions, and I think it would be worth us ensuring that we actually give proper consideration to that. I agree with Councillor Tedder in terms of the redevelopment of a car lot into housing will be an improvement for a local area. I personally don't believe that changing a car lot to housing is affecting the openness of the green space. I would probably suspect that removing a load of cars is probably better for the green belt. But I just wanted to kind of add that I will be voting against the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. I'm afraid my design, and in fact when the presentation was done, it's very, very small. But could the officer please tell me what the size of those parking spaces, which those parking spaces will be? That's point number one. I've got a couple of other things to come back on. So I think we can gauge it from that little tiny distance marker that we've got from the parking places right at the bottom as a rough estimate.
Sorry, it's the standard 4.2 by 2.8.
Sorry, 4.2 by 2.8.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to pick up actually on some of the points that have been made by, for example, Morgan, Councillor Rise, and also Councillors Tedder and McGrath. I think we are all in agreement that this site could be improved. What I think is very important, and it's new for all of us, the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan, and actually adhering to the policies within the Neighbourhood Plan. So the very first policy that I would like to bring out is that there is a minimum space and size requirement for parking spaces within the Neighbourhood Plan, and that is 2.9 metres by 5.5 metres. So unfortunately, although I would like to praise the applicant on trying to improve the spaces, he hasn't met the parking requirements of Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan because they aren't big enough. So that's the first point. Going back to some of the points that the other speakers have made, there are other things within the neighbourhood plan with which they don't agree. So I think it's 3.1 says that there must be discrete waste storage. As you pull into this site, the waste storage and the location of the waste storage is actually quite prominent. It's not obscured, it's a very definite waste area. And so therefore, I'm afraid it hasn't met that requirement of the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan. The other thing as well that they said is that the application should be to a scale of the surrounding areas. And you can look at the surrounding areas here. And if we were to look at a wider view, you will see that the surrounding areas tend to be larger properties in discrete areas. One could argue that that is outweighed by the Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan looking for 2 and 3 bedroomed houses, which have been identified as a need. The Windlesham Plan goes on to say that actually flats are not supported on the basis that there is an over provision of flats within Windlesham. The other point where it's not fitting with the neighbourhood plan is that there is a statement in there which relates to having enough amenity space, i.e. there should be enough amenity space to meet the needs of the householders on site. And if you look at the very, very small amount of amenity space that is there for flats 1 to 4, I think you would find that with current social distancing, we would struggle, or they would struggle to sit in that amenity space safely. I am really supportive of some form of development in this area, but this is unfortunately too much and it doesn't fit in with the recommendation of the neighbourhood plan. I can also see no provision for electric charging points. And that's actually a requirement of the lead authority with the neighbourhood plan. In fact, if you look at the location of where the car parking is and the power to the site, it would be very difficult for electric car charging points to actually be provided within this site. So I'm afraid that's an area where it doesn't meet with the recommendation that has been given by Surrey County Council over and above the requirement of the neighbourhood plan. So I'm really sorry that I am genuinely really sorry. And the wonderful thing about having truly independent candidates is that and representation is that we can have very similar, very different reasonings behind it. I am absolutely supportive of something happening here. The hard standing, incidentally, just as another point that they refer to, isn't all hard standing. It's actually compressed, almost like mud, if you like, with stones on top, which is absolutely permeable, and that is sort of slightly more green in nature than concrete. So it's not all concreted in. And I'm slightly concerned about the way in which they have done a calculation in terms of the reduction in the built form. I can only assume that they've taken the sort of cubic or volume of the cars that are parked there, because it seems a little bit high for the actual true built form that is there. So for all of those reasons, and actually some of the reasons over and above the officer's recommendation refusal, in that it absolutely does not adhere to the policies within Windlesham Neighbourhood Plan, I will be supporting the officer's recommendation regretfully. And as I said, I would praise the applicant for moving forward with it, but it doesn't meet the requirements of the neighbourhood plan.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Yeah, I think a lot of us would like to see this site developed, but it's quite clear. The officers say it's considered inappropriate and harmful development in the green belt, meeting none of the exceptions for new buildings within the green belt, and harmful to the openness due to quantum of built form proposed and there's lack of very special circumstances, which is the main reason that they've given that. Does anybody else wish to comment on this? Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to take issue with Councillor Wheeler's comments about the visibility of refuse bins. I'm looking now at the overhead diagram of the property as it is proposed to be developed, and it's quite evident that the bin store is quite deep within the development, right next to the building called Shanklin. And the diagram shows that it will be completely obscured from the road by vegetation on both sides. So I don't agree with her objection there on the situation with regard to the waste bins. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler.
I can only assume that we're looking at different plans. It's actually adjacent to Matthew's Corner building, directly on the boundary of that building, is my understanding is the bin storage, but maybe it's my eyesight and or maybe there's two of them.
Yes, Councillor Chapman, this is the last time I'm having you two having a private discussion.
Yes, what Councillor Wheeler is mistaking for the bin store is actually a bike store.
Cool. Bike. Oh, right. Okay. Right, on your bike. Right, thank you. And does anybody else have a comment to make? If not, we have an officer recommendation to refuse. Is there a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Wheeler, does anybody wish to second that application? Councillor Crowe got the first. All those in agreement with the office? Okay. Sorry, I've stopped halfway through.
In respect of what I said earlier, unfortunately, Councillor Whitcroft, you were out of the meeting for a sizable amount of time, and as a result won't be able to vote on this item.
Right, so Mr. Scott, are you could you please go through the list? We have the proposer and the seconder, and if you could run through the list, please.
Councillor Graham Alloway.
I support the officer recommendation.
Councillor Peter Barnett.
I support it too.
Councillor Cliff Betton.
I'd vote against.
Councillor Sarah Jane Croke.
Agree with the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Colin Dugan.
Agreed.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
Agreed.
Councillor Edward Hawkins.
Agreed.
Councillor David Lewis.
Agreed.
Councillor Charlotte Morley.
Agreed.
Councillor Darrell Rataram.
Against.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
Against.
Councillor Graham Tapper.
Against the recommendation to refuse.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
For.
And Councillor Valerie White.
For.
Three. The motion is carried 11 votes to 3. So thank you, members, on that. And now on to the next item. Right, so we're moving on to the next item, item number 4, to which Mrs. Bishop is leaving the building. Well, she left the chamber, not the building. Yep, she's gone. Yeah. We're item number 4 is on page 111. It's 12 Golney Road, Camberley, under declarations. If you haven't guessed it and read the papers already, the applicant is a member of staff who has left the chamber. And are there any other declarations to make on this one? We've lost somebody.
Let's work out who it is.
Just a second, Graham.
Chair, can we take a pause? was Sean Gats asked.
No, he said it's okay if it's any quick.
Oh, okay.
Who's missing? Who's gone?
Oh, I would think Pat Tedder has left it.
Is it Pat's gone? Right. Okay. Thank you, Bill. Graham, Councillor Tapper.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I'd just like to declare that this proposed development is within my ward. I am the councillor for this particular I am familiar with the property. I have spoken to the resident, but only in the course of canvassing them in preparation for the an election. I have not spoken to them about this particular application.
Councillor, noted. Thank you. Any other declarations? No. Mrs. Teresia, please. Miss, big one.
Thank you, Chair.
Right.
Thank you. The application site is 12 Albany Road in Camberley, as you can see here outlined in red. This application seeks consent for the erection of a single-story front extension here and replacement of a conservatory roof here and changes to external materials. Here you can see the elevations as existing on the top row and as proposed on the bottom row. The proposed change in materials from timber to composite cladding on the dormers would be in keeping with the character of the property. The proposals would both be small in scale and subservient to the host dwelling. For these reasons, and also taking into account the relationship with the nearest properties, it's not considered that the development would be detrimental to the character of the area or to the residential amenities of the nearest neighbours. Here you can see some site photos. This is the front of the property where the front extension would be located, and this is the conservatory which roof would be replaced. The application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much on that. Just for the sake of anybody that is listening that's not on the committee, this would normally have been considered by delegated authority, but of course, as it was a member of staff, the application automatically comes to the committee. Members, are there any comments anybody wishes to make on this? If not, can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Councillor Dugan, Councillor Rise. We'll go through the system, but is there anybody against? No. You've done enough reading tonight.
Okay.
We'll let Mr. Scott off, I think. And members are that is.
Nobody's abstained as well.
Any abstentions either? No, that's carried unanimously.
Can we check they're all voting for as well?
You're all voting. Nobody's said either way, so it's deemed voting. Yeah, we got it all. Thank you. That's the end of the evening. Thank you very much, everybody. That went very well indeed. And thanks for all the input. A date of next meeting, I haven't the foggiest idea what it is. Anybody know?
28th of May.
28th of May, is it? All right. 28th of May is the next meeting. Look forward to seeing you all then. And thank you very much. And to one and all, and good night.